Right. Welcome everybody to this panel on public administration and careers in higher education. We're very fortunate to have some really good panelists from here at Indiana State University, as well as a former MPA student who's now seeking her Ph.D. To talk about their different experiences. So my name is Dr. Nathan Myers. I'm the director of the Masters of Public Administration program here at Indiana State University. And we'll start off by, I'll let the panelists introduce themselves so they can just talk about their name and their current position in higher education. So we'll start with David there on the end.
Hello, my name is David Kachman. I am the Occupancy Specialist for the Department of Residential Life. In my role, I build our student-facing housing portal and the system that involves that. And then based off of the data we collect through that and institutional research, I provide data information to our Division of Student Affairs and also to the institution's leadership.
My name is Jolyn Osborne. I am the Risk and Insurance Manager for the university. I deal with all the risk situation, events on campus, and I manage all the insurance policies.
And my name is Stephannie Gambill. I'm the university's Director of Equal Opportunity and the Title IX Coordinator. So my responsibilities involve training and education across the campus for faculty, staff, and students on our discrimination and anti-harassment policies, and then conducting investigations when there are allegations of discrimination, harassment, or sexual misconduct.
All right, and we have Yasmine online. So Yasmine, you introduce yourself.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Very happy to be here today. Yasmine Haiti, a PhD candidate in political science at the University of Illinois, Chicago, and also a research assistant at the Global Middle East Studies program at UIC as well. So my work is somewhere at the intersection of comparative and urban politics. And for my work, I'm trying to help design, an educational program right now at my university. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And just to be clear, this is being recorded so that we can publish this on the ISU MPA YouTube page and maybe in some other venues as well. So we can share it with other students who might be interested. And we do have some audience in the room. So at any time, if you have any questions, feel free to, raise your hand and, jump in with the question. I have some pre-established questions, but I'm assuming you probably have better questions than I do. So feel free to let me know if you have anything. But with that in mind, we'll start with the first question was, if you could talk about a little bit about your educational background and your sort of professional career path that led you to your current position. So we'll kind of stay in the same order. So we'll start with David and go from there.
All right, so I have my bachelor's in biomedical science with a chemistry minor from Western Michigan. I got that in 2009. After that, I worked about 12 years in retail leadership. And then in 2016, I moved to working at Indiana State within residential life as an office coordinator. Through there, I realized that higher education was an area that I wanted to keep pursuing. In the initial part of my undergraduate work, I started as a poli-sci major, public policy major. And so the public admin position or degree was kind of a natural transition for me to move over, wanting to stay in higher education, but the fact that the policy parts that influenced higher ed were a great interest to me too. So if I didn't stay in higher education, the public admin degree kind of gave me that avenue to transition to government work or to contracting work within government policies. With the MPA, it's kind of the program gave me a greater insight into my position, especially the data analytics. That was something within the MPA program, looking at how to do better research, meaningful research, and finding better data sets and how to pull information from those. With my position, I do a lot of forecasting and occupancy reporting. And so learning to build the correct reports for data that our department and our institution needs. And then also looking at other institutions and how they're pulling that data and how it's influencing changes at their institutions.
I attended St. Mary the Woods College for my undergraduate in paralegal studies, and then I obtained my master's degree in public administration here at ISU in 2023. My career started off working for a bankruptcy attorney in federal court, and then I switched to family law, which deals with custody, DCS, divorces, paternity cases. Then I worked for the state of Indiana as an investigator for sex abuse cases for minors. And then I ended up working in the legal department here at ISU. Working in the legal department, I was able to work with a bunch of different counterparts on campus. So I had a lot of networking skills between faculty, staff, and students. And that led me into my promotion that I received as a risk manager. So I still work with the legal department with lawsuits that ISU may receive, EEOC complaints, contract work. But I also still work with a variety of departments on campus, and I work with a lot of students, fraternity and sororities as well. So the degree, I would say, while I didn't really have the experience in insurance, that was something to be able to top. Having the institutional knowledge and the legal background really helped me be a strong candidate for the promotion, and I enjoy where I'm at now.
So I think I might be our oldest panelist. I graduated from St. Mary the Woods College as well in '94 with a degree in legal studies and a minor in business administration. And stayed at my very first job after graduating from college. I took a position in the legal department with the city of Terre Haute. And we were responsible for drafting ordinances, defending civil litigation, prosecuting ordinance violations, risk management, HR, personnel, municipal development of public easements. We did it all. I was there for 22 years and served under 5 mayoral administrations. And then the opportunity opened up here at ISU to work in the legal department. I was actually Jolyn's predecessor in that office. In that role, again, we work with faculty, staff, and students. But the Title IX Equal Opportunity Office originally reported to that office. And so I got my feet a little bit wet learning about what that office does. Eventually that office was moved out of the general counsel's office. There was a vacancy in that position. Initially, it required a master's degree to apply for it, but based on my experience, years of service, specialty, they did offer me the position. I took it and then was able to attend Indiana State University and get my master's degree, which just strengthened my knowledge and ability to perform that position.
Thank you. Yasmine?
Yeah. Well, my career, like my educational background is a little different. So I'm originally from Morocco, and the way they do things back home is a little, so I didn't really have, like, I don't really have a bachelor's degree. They directly get us into a master's degree, like a master's granting program kind of thing. And so I have a master's of business administration from my home country. And then I joined the MPA program at ISU because I've always wanted to do political science, but didn't really get a chance to do that back home. So I kind of like needed a smooth transition from business into politics. And I think public administration was the middle ground, right? In which you get involved with politics, but while like there's also that aspect of administration to it, which kind of like was really smooth and really helpful for transitioning. So yeah, that's as far as the master's degrees are concerned. And then I started my PhD at UIC. And that's where I held most of the positions I actually formally worked for, right? So I worked as a research assistant at the Arab American Cultural Center. I worked also as a research assistant for the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. Um, that is pretty much it. I don't really have an extensive professional experience, but this whole entire time has been dedicated to building my educational background pretty much.
Thank you very much. The next question I had was, what is the most rewarding thing about your current position?
So for me, working in housing, we directly impact the lives of our students that live with us. So we have 2,000 to 3,000 students that live with us on campus every year. And you kind of hear like the stories about, oh, these students did great. They walked across the graduation stage. We got them to move on to a master's degree. But actually getting to see students in the building, interacting with staff members, and then not just having the stories to tell, but the actual data to back it. And so with my position, I get a lot of the times where we can see how are students persisting through the institution, how students living on campus versus living off campus, how are their GPAs different? And getting to tell the stories behind students who live on campus, and if they live on their first year versus 4 years, how that impacts their experience at Indiana State. And being part of that and being part of our department's leadership team and getting to influence the policies, the direction and mission of our department, in influencing those numbers. So what can we do in those buildings to make our students' lives better, to get them to the persistence across the stage, to get Indiana State. And we're a residential curriculum department. And so using a curriculum, not just in the classroom, but in the residence halls, and how that impacts them and in their growth as a person, in their professional success. And so that's just getting not just the feel goods about them walking across the stage, but then getting that data. And so when we have those questions, people come and say, well, what is your department doing? How are they influencing it? Not just saying, yeah, we have students graduate, but we have the data to back how well they're doing when they're here. And then the institutional part of when they leave here, what kind of jobs are they getting? How are they persisting past that? So that's kind of the best part of my job, is getting to meet students, but then also getting to look at that data that helps support all the stories that we're getting on campus.
I'd say for me, I work with a great team. They're very positive, but they've all been here 30 plus years. So they all have a desire and passion for ISU. So that's really great to see. One of the things that I enjoy is I'm very proactive and not reactive. So working with the students in the 3 years I've been in this role, many of them were used to risk management, always saying no to their ideas. But for me, also being a parent, you know how important it is for students to have fun activities, but allow them to be able to connect with their peers. So one of my things is help me say yes. And so we collaborate and come up with ideas. And so what I've been able to do in this role is create procedures for risky type events, but will allow them to coordinate with other people on campus to be able to do those things. And so being able to see students or other departments be able to do things that they're normally told no, and it be successful because they took the time to plan it out, that's a good feeling. And it's good to watch them, you know, use their think tank and be successful.
In my area, one of the most rewarding pieces is that I have this blending of students and faculty and the law, and the ability to kind of be a protector of due process. So frequently I may be meeting a student to discuss with them as an investigator one of the worst days of their lives. And then when I'm talking to the person that's been accused, it may also be one of the worst days of their lives. And being able to walk through this process with both of them, knowing that it's fair, that I'm protecting their rights, that I care about the outcome and care about them, is so satisfying. One of my favorite stories is I had a stalking allegation that I had investigated, and it had gone on for quite some time. And during the investigative process, during the hearing, the respondent, the person that was accused, was very angry with me. Very angry that the charges been brought, very angry that they had to meet with me, very angry that they had to participate in this process and take them away from the other things that they wanted to be doing. And they were ultimately found responsible by the panel. But the week of their senior year of graduation, they stopped by my office and gave me a hug and said that it was really beneficial. They always knew that in the end, I cared about them. There were some life lessons that they learned that hopefully we're preparing to send them out into the real world with better skills. And I think that was one of the most rewarding interactions that I had is being able to watch these students develop and have those educational opportunities, so we know that we're sending them out better and more informed than when we got.
Yasmine?
One of the most rewarding things about pursuing a PhD in political science, it revolves around the opportunity to make meaningful impact through research and scholarship, especially by working on something that interests you. You know, something that you do not mind staying up working on at night, something that you find purpose in developing. So as a doctoral student, you delve deeply into like complex political issues, you develop innovative theories, and you contribute new insights to the field. So this process, it does not just, it does not just advance academic knowledge, but it can also influence real-world policy and practice. And when I'm saying this, it may sound abstract or like too idealistic, but after publishing a piece or after writing a report, deep down, you know that people out there are going to be checking it out, people who are interested in what you're doing, and it may change something, and that what keeps me personally going. And another rewarding aspect is the intellectual challenge and personal growth that comes with it. You engage with cutting edge ideas, you grapple with tough questions, you refine your critical thinking and analytical skills, and the journey of exploring and understanding the dynamics of political systems, the behaviors, the institutions, and doing it not just at the US level, but internationally, just brings in a whole lot of different perspectives. There are also like the connections that you build with other scholars, practitioners, with your students. They can be inspiring, they can be professionally rewarding. The sense of contributing to broader understanding of political phenomena and you start developing like a different view on the world, a different perspective that probably other people don't necessarily have, or they don't have the capacity to read things in that same way because you're coming with a background and you know about certain theories and a whole bunch of different things. And there's also this idea of being your own boss, right? To a certain extent, setting your own schedule, unless for when you have to take classes or give classes later if you choose academia as a path. But you work at your own pace, you're your own boss, among many other things. I'm not really doing justice to being a PhD candidate right now, but these are just a few things I could think of right now.
Great. Thank you very much, Yasmine. So the next question is the flip side of that. So the biggest challenge of your current position, David?
So I think in general, just one of the challenges of working in higher education is we don't have a crystal ball, right? So we don't know what politicians are going to do with policy that are going to influence how we do our jobs every day. If with essentially the stroke of a pen, if the governor or the president's going to sign a bill that negates large chunks of our roles. So within Indiana, Senate Bill 202, how that's gonna impact higher education in Indiana and what we do and how we try to help our students become better people, better accepting, more knowledgeable. So not having that crystal ball about how things are gonna happen and kind of keeping that at kind of the forefront of your mind, but not distracting from what our task is at hand. And that's getting students to cross the stage, but to be better when they leave than when they got here. Some other kind of things too is we don't know how enrollment's gonna be. So working in a department that's an auxiliary, which essentially just means that we're self-funded. So how much money we have, our operating budget is based off of how many students come to ISU and how many live with us. And so having to constantly think of, you know, what is our occupancy? How is that going to influence our budget? How's that going to influence hiring staff positions? And having services for students that we offer. And trying to think about what are the best ways that if our budget goes this way, how can we still service our students and keep safety, keep the things that we're currently offering students, but maybe do that with less money. And how can we move things along and move things around to keep better servicing them. I think another challenge that we face too is trying to change our processes and keep our processes in line with the students that we're serving. So how students move through a housing application and contract process now is going to be completely different than students 4 years from now because of how they perceive what is a legal document, what does legally binding mean, how do we have to explain these everyday things to an evolving student population. And so it's having to constantly evolve our processes, our mission to meet students where they are, but also keep in mind of this is kind of just the baseline of what it is, and how do we keep explaining that and evolving it with students and not just stay stuck in our current ways, and be constantly evolving and moving with our students.
Great, thank you. Jolyn.
I mentioned before, one of the good things was being able to work with a lot of people on campus, but that can also be a struggle when you're working with a lot of people because everybody has their own opinions and think things should go certain ways. So trying to be able to find a common ground to do what is best for the university and to protect the university is actually a challenge. Another challenge is how insurance is always changing. Requirements are always changing, especially for government entities, and the premiums are constantly going up. Even if you have no claims, there's always a way to try to nickel and dime you. And so when you're trying to be cautious with the budget that you have for insurance, it makes it a little difficult because at the end of the day, you have to have coverage for a variety of things. We have 11 different policies here on campus that are rather large, and then there's some small ones, and they come with a price. So keeping up on that is a challenge.
I would say the two primary challenges for my office would be regulation and the political climate. So the Title IX regulations have changed with the last 3 presidential administrations. Currently, there are several states within the United States that are under an injunction to prohibit the implementation of the 2024 Title IX regulations. There's also several states that have issued do not implement regulations. And so trying to stay up to date and understand best practice and communicate that message to our campus is really difficult because we can have a student come in as a freshman and these are the rules and expectations and policies. And by the time they graduate as a senior, we've changed that regulation. There's been a court ruling that changes the implementation before the time that they graduate. So keeping abreast of the national politics of national regulations and court cases, and then getting our campus to transition quickly to keep up with that. The other challenge I would say in my role is, it's housed in academic affairs, but we collaborate with all of our campus partners, and so we really work with student affairs. And so like I really do need to be in my office from 8 to 4:30 to get my administrative tasks done. But student activities are happening on the evenings and weekends. And so, for example, our fraternities and sororities have their chapter meetings on Sunday nights or Sunday afternoon or in the evenings. And if they ask us to come in and do a presentation, I'm coming back or staying on Sunday nights or evenings. That's when our students have that free time. And I absolutely want to be there and I want to engage with our students in those more casual settings. And so like my work day isn't 8 to 4:30. It's 8 to whenever that last evening program stops or coming in on that weekend, because it's so important that our students know who we are if we're going to tell them about changing regulations and policies. And one of the messages I always give is, if I don't tell you what the rules and expectations are, how can I possibly discipline you or correct you for behavior that you didn't even know was inappropriate? And so forging those relationships with all of those populations is so important in developing that trust.
Okay, Yasmine?
Um, I was just talking with a lot of excitement about what is rewarding about being in a PhD program. I guess it like the challenges are gonna tame down everything I said earlier, but you know, being in a PhD program comes with intellectual and emotional demands, right? When you're dealing with word problems, the depth and complexity of the research can be overwhelming. And let alone the whole process of having to like craft a dissertation, which requires like extensive readings and analysis, at times field work, like having to travel to other parts of the country or going abroad. Like the whole idea of like dealing with the frustration of refining your thoughts and overcoming the obstacles and challenges. That is very emotionally demanding and intellectually demanding, which I wish I knew before joining the program. But again, like whenever I remember this, I just circle back to where I started and I'm like, well, what are the rewards? I'm trying to weigh the pros and cons. Um, Doing a PhD is also a little bit like it's a very lonely process. I'll just put it that way. Um, when you have to think and to write and to be creative, you have to isolate. You can't, you could observe certain things in the community if your work requires you to be with a certain group of people. You may interact with colleagues during conferences, you may interact with your students, but the core, the essence of what you're doing, which is the research, requires you to isolate and to be alone. Um, there's also like another thing I find challenging is balancing the different responsibilities that you have on your plate, right? So you're wearing different hats, you're a student, but you're also a teacher at the same time. And you have your own coursework going on, and so trying to find a balance with your professional life and trying to like add your personal life to it and maintain a healthy work-life balance in which you're not, setting aside your personal life while you're trying to pursue bigger roles. And again, like going back to my initial point about being your own boss and setting your own schedule, doing research may be a 24/7 thing. It's not like sometimes you're inspired and you just want to put your thoughts down into Word document, and other times you want to prioritize other things that you may find more important at that particular period of your life. um and trying to think without scaring people off, how can I put this into decent words? There's also, sometimes you just feel overwhelmed and you feel like you're drowning, and you're not sure about whether you're doing the right thing, and you start doubting yourself. You know, like, is this even worth it? Especially when you start feeling that it's being dragged, like the process is taking too long, the writing is very slow. You start questioning, is this puzzle that I'm working on interesting? Is whatever I'm writing going to inspire people? Does it have the impact that I think it would be having? You know, you start, like, it's self-doubt, but I personally see it as a self-doubt that helps you grow better. You know, it pushes you to be a better scholar, to do better, to trust yourself. You know, it's dilemmas, it's a lot of them, but you wind up at the end of the day like producing something that's coming from uncertainty, from self-doubt. And again, um it's always connected to this intellectual and emotional demand that comes with being in the program. um you know, being a PhD candidate also comes with financial challenges, right? So you feel financially pressured because you have to dedicate your time to a certain program, to being a student, to doing your research, which does not reward you in the ways you probably expect, or in ways that would help you meet your financial ends, right? And so that's something to think about for people who later on would want to join a PhD program, to kind of plan it ahead. You know, make sure that you're financially prepared for it. Because whatever you encounter when you're in a PhD program does not necessarily, um, you know, it's not necessarily going to help you progress in the way you want to. And then you can be hit with the reality of the job market if you want to be in academia down the road. It's very competitive, um, and the expectations are really high. And so, you know, it's easier to find a job, I would say, in the industry. Like if you would like something outside of higher education, like a tenured track position, it's a lot easier with a PhD in pretty much any field in the social sciences. But if you want to be in academia, people expect you to have a certain number of publications. They expect you to present at certain conferences. Um, and so you have to build that while you're in the PhD program. Basically, like it's work in progress, and you build your resume in the ways in which you want to cater yourself right later to the needs of the job market and your own needs.
Right, thank you, Yasmine, I appreciate that. So the next question is asking, and some of you have kind of touched upon some of this already, examples of how concepts from public administration have helped you in your professional career or your academic work.
So I think with me, a big part of it is when we did a lot of like the program evaluations. And I can't remember what the name of the book is, but there's
I wrote it down. It's called Evaluation in Action.
Yes. So I actually still have it in my office. It's just sitting every day I look at it. Case studies that were in that book, I still have the post-it note stuck in there. So when we're designing new processes for residential life or within student affairs, I'm involved with those implementations and the think through processes, that I think back on the knowledge I gained from the program and how, if someone is looking at this externally, how would it fare? Would they look at it and think, oh my, like, what were you all thinking? Or no, like this follows the flow that it needs to, the outcomes are gonna hit what you need them to hit. And also in our role, a lot of it too is just some of the additional critical thinking. Looking at other programs that have happened that we're trying to do. I've been really fortunate that with the housing software that we utilize, I'm now presented at 6 of their international conferences. And then I've participated in conferences presenting for AHU Hawaii, which is our industry kind of organization for housing officers. And just getting to kind of talk through from that other lens, it's also given me, because a lot of people within higher education, student affairs, come from that world. They have degrees in that world. So having the public administration where there's a little bit of student affairs that you can mix into it, but the concepts learned from public administration and bringing those in, just not from student affairs. And getting to talk to other housing professionals of, you know, have you thought about it this way? Not using that student affairs lens, but looking at it from a policy lens. And it's just been kind of one of those things. I was lucky to get the degree I got. And that's why I went with public administration over Saki, was I wanted that different perspective to bring into my profession, and to help me progress in my career. Because I might not necessarily be working in the residence halls all the time. But having those concepts and getting to weave the two together, and kind of get the best of both worlds out of it.
I think for me, I am asked to sit on a lot of task force or planning event committees for large events that involves outside groups from ISU. And a lot of times people don't want to include me because once no comes out, then I'm a roadblock for them. Flight Academy is a really big example. They like to be extremely risky and cause a lot of gray hairs for myself. But we always try to find a solution. So I would say what I've learned, the same thing, program evaluation, it's helped me to be an even more critical thinker, to think outside of the box. If they have things that they want to do, I'm going to say no, then what will I accept? What can we do? Will that be successful? So for me, everything is from a risk management standpoint. Unfortunately, my brain still goes legal, and I think about all the implications that could happen on that side as well. And then, like, a new thing that I'm getting ready to be on is the Artificial Intelligence Task Force. So with what I've learned and my connections with associations is I can do a lot of benchmarking with other universities to see what they're doing, and I'll be able to bring that information to the task force to, hopefully be able to help ISU understand what it is that we're able to do, what we shouldn't do, and best practices, and create procedures that will be available.
The best concepts that I studied while I was in the MPA program were like I said, I looked up the book because it was my favorite textbook. It was Evaluation in Action. So I hope we're still using it. And understanding the importance of collaboration and stakeholder involvement. That seemed to be the two themes that were so prevalent in that program evaluation. And being able to think outside the box. And if something's not working, having the guts to pull the plug on it or to try something creative. And the answer shouldn't always be no. But also seeing case studies and seeing how important it was to not just collaborate, but to actually pull information out from those stakeholders, like making sure that they understand their value to the overall process. The second area was the personnel development, the human resource pieces. Really seeing the application, because my position is a legal premised position, being able to understand the dynamics of supervision and employment, how important it is, for example, that we don't just terminate employees, we create a record, we give them opportunities, how important documentation is in any field, no matter what career you have. If you're a supervisor, understanding that sometimes it's going to be necessary to engage in difficult conversations. Those were all those concepts that were just in our case studies were constantly reinforced, that it's not just in my little niche that it's happening. It's universal across all professions.
Yasmine?
I will provide like a different take on this, a more like of a student take on this, and how whatever is provided in public administration, like in the MPA program, associates with what I did and what I'm doing right now. So I remember taking classes on American politics, talking about power and institutions. And for a person who is not from political science background, that really gave me a strong foundation to what was coming next, like to literally entering a political science program, right? So like when I was attending classes on political representation, on institutions and politics and stuff like that, I kind of knew what the whole thing was about. I did not feel lost. I feel like I had some background there. I remember taking a class on, and Nathan, please correct me if I'm wrong, but we took a class on financial management, right? It was like budgeting. Because I remember like writing a budget and we had like a textbook about it. That helped me tremendously with grant writing. And believe it or not, like I ace my grants. I get most of them whenever I write them because like the budgeting part has been super helpful. I'm still referring back to my notes from the class whenever I want to work on a budget. Um, so it helped me with the grant writing part that I'm doing for my research assistant job on campus, but also for my own, like the own grants, like the grants that I write for my own research. Um, and then there was the research methods class and the statistics class. Um, those courses helped me when I started working as a research assistant with the cultural center, with the Office of Diversity in my university. It kind of helped me have structure with my reports. You know how like we get studies done. It's pretty much similar to a research process. You put a survey out there and then you have to translate the results into a report. The research methods class was everything I put on the reports. I still have the textbook, I still use it sometimes. Whether be it for the stats class or the research methods class. So bottom line, whatever the way the courses are designed in the MPA program are literally catered to help people not only in the industry, but also people who want to do research later, to follow like a research career. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think you all have pretty much answered the next question already, but if there's any other information that you gained from the program that you haven't mentioned yet, that sort of has stuck with you and helped you either professionally or personally in some way.
I think one thing I didn't mention was, growing up with computers and that and learning like Excel from a young age, this program helped me understand the power of Excel. I spend at least 50% of my job doing analytics, looking at data, pulling data out, utilizing Excel spreadsheets in ways that I never really considered, even as my undergrad, over 10 years ago. And it was just one of those things of, something you never think about going into a profession of how am I going to use a Microsoft product? And being in the program, it forced me to learn a lot of methods and making Excel work for me. A lot of the times when you're doing programs and you're doing data analytics and you don't know it, you're doing stuff the long way. And so building, pivot tables and all sorts of things to do analytics with it, or just building out, reports that you can easily dump data into week after week, and not having to reinvent the wheel every single time. So that was just one of those things I never thought I would get out of the program, and was kind of one of those happy accidents. And it's just the fact that every single day I'm in an Excel spreadsheet doing some kind of pulling data, whether it's for a department, for our VP for Student Affairs, for the president's office, trying to get numbers, trying to get data for them. I think the other piece that ended up being just kind of not happy happenstance, was as we were in the program, COVID happened. And so having to, I can't remember what course it was. I think it was like a special topics. And I know Dr. Myers had one topic planned out, and then we pivoted to, you're now a consultant for a city that has been hit by COVID. What are you going to do? How are you going to use budget? How are you going to do these different things? And pulling all these pieces from our program together, and working in housing as COVID hit, that has kind of helped reinforce the things that we were doing as an institution and a department of, okay, what are we going to do? You have 3,000 students living on campus. How are you going to help them? What are you going to do policy-wise? What is the CDC saying? These are the guidelines. How are you going to implement those down? And so it's kind of that surrealness of real-time education mixed with my profession at the same time. And not being as, I guess, like afraid of it, was that I education, like research on it and actual implementations within our program and different materials that we're reading. And they're like, okay, hey, this is something I read, this is what's going on. And having those informed decisions sitting at the table. So that was, I never expected it to happen. So those are kind of like two coincidental things that I learned in the program that I would have never learned if I wasn't in it.
I'd say the same for me. I have to collect a lot of data for VP McKee, for finance and administration, that she reports to the president, to the board about the different types of matters that come through the office, what I handle. I'm also responsible for the minors on campus training. So they used to do online courses, but now it's migrating into in-person training and being able to track who's done that every 2 years and who's required to do it. And, same thing with everyone that's an approved driver for the campus, for the driving training. Everything goes in Excel and I'm able to pull all the data that way.
My comments were going to be on the research course as well. So in my undergraduate, most of our research was confined to legal studies, so cases, statutes, regulations. I had not taken a statistics course since the spring of 1991 that was taught by a nun. And it was before Microsoft Office was really a thing in the internet. And we were allowed to write all of our formulas, as many formulas as we wanted, on an index card. And so I will tell you, I was terrified to take the research class because I knew there was a statistical component when I got into the program. I think Nathan will back me up on this. It was an online course, but he actually taught it in a classroom. And I would come physically to the classroom to be in there. So maybe through osmosis, through education, I was trying to get access to everything. But it was so important for me to be able to understand data collection and samples. You know, you can say this happened to 5 people, but if it's 5 people in 10, it's more significant than 5 people in 100. And so that was so impactful for me. And again, it ties into that being able to use data in your program review. And if you're doing something that's impactful or not impactful. So one of the things we're constantly looking at is like, are we making an impact on prevention and risk reduction? Are we getting more reports because we're doing a better job of telling people who we are and what we do, or are actually more cases happening? So being able to do those deep dives and understand the sample population and to be able to interpret the data. I am not a numbers person at all. I don't do math in my head. And I worked so hard in that course, but it was, I would say, like, I would never say it was my favorite course, but it probably was one of the most impactful courses.
Yasmine?
Honestly, there's no one memory or like one good thing to share about the MPA program at ISU. It's generally the entire experience. Being in a supportive department where professors, they genuinely care about your success, about what is next on your career line. You do feel like they have an interest in each individual student. You know, because it's a smaller department, you feel more valued in a sense. Then there's the quality of the courses that are provided. The courses are very well organized. The content is structured, well designed, appealing to people with different interests. You know, they're just like simplified in a way that is really accessible. Then there's a diversity of course offerings too, you know, especially with the type of electives. Like I never felt like I was short of options. I always had a lot of choices that nurtured my intellectual interests. There was also like the overall environment of the department. I was always in my office pretty much every day except on weekends, and just the whole vibe of being there, sharing small talks and longer conversations when needed, the nature of interactions with fellow grad students, the work environment as well. It felt like a family where like elders, seniors, and sorry, not calling you elder, Nathan, it's just seniors, like, you know, how like seniors look after the younger generation or like after the students. And I'm not doing justice to the program by such a restrained description of all the good moments at ISU, but for the sake of time, I'll just stop here.
Thank you very much. So the next question is, so from your perspective in your field, if there was something, we talked a lot about research. So, for academics like me or graduate students or undergraduate students that might be doing research, if there was one thing related to your field that you would want academics and students to sort of delve deeper into and get a better understanding of, what would that be to help you in your area? If there was an area of research that would help you. Start with David.
I think something that'd be interesting for me would be, especially now in the current political climate, would be policies that are one way or another on DEIJ topics and how they're influencing students' decisions to go to an institution. Obviously working in residential life, working at a public institution in Indiana, depending on what state legislature does, what federal government does, that might sway students from coming to a college, depending on how that state, how that institution reacts to policies. So how that's impacting enrollment management. I said, working in housing, we are directly impacted by enrollment. If enrollment numbers are lower due to a policy at an institution or government, that's going to impact how many students live with us, and then that impacts our budget. So I think that's something that kind of merges the SACI ideals with the public admin ideals, is how are those policies not just influencing how a college operates, but how is it impacting the number of student population? Or, if you have a number of students who are here and you lose a group of them, a chunk of them, due to policy, they transfer to another institution for a master's degree or doctorate degree or undergrad midstream. How are those policies influencing those numbers?
Okay. Jolyn.
Got like two parts. So one thing I would like them to spend money on to figure out is students that we don't retain in the enrollment, because if we don't have students here, then we don't have a job. So that's our job security. Another thing, which I'm not in HR, but a lot of the stuff will trickle down to me, is I really wish they would research and invest in better supervisor training, to educate on how to be a strong supervisor, hold people accountable, but be able to retain good employees and, kind of find a way to compensate for the good. So instead of a percentage straight across for everybody, I think they should do a merit system and kind of research how other people would feel about that, because why is someone going to continue to work hard if someone down here is doing the bare minimum, but yet they get the same increase? So I think what we need to do is, how are we retaining students, but how are we going to retain good employees that have an impact on our students and provide them a very good experience?
In 1957, there was a study done that revealed about 1 in 4 women would be sexually assaulted before they graduated from college. 1957. Now here we are in 2024, and that statistic is still the same. And we have much more sophisticated prevention and risk reduction conversations. And so I'd like to see some kind of study about what is the most effective way to share that prevention and risk reduction messaging. For example, institutions that require their students to do the online training module where they click through and click the buttons. Is that effective? Or is being face-to-face in a classroom and engaging in a conversation? Is it peer mentors? Is it people in the residence halls? What is the most effective method to prevent injury and risk and reduce risk reduction? I don't know that anybody has the answer, and I think it's a conversation that campuses across the United States struggle with. And we know, when I was in college, if there was a campus program, we would go to it because there wasn't anything else to do. We didn't have cable TV. We didn't have Netflix. We couldn't sit in our room and binge watch a TV show. And so we have programs on campus that people don't go to. So how are we getting people to attend programs when there's another option of something where they don't even have to put their clothes on? They don't have to get out of their pajamas and come. So those are the kinds of things that I'm interested in, is engagement and risk reduction, because does it need to even start earlier? Do we need to be having these conversations in K through 12 before they get to college? I think there's just a great opportunity for research across the whole spectrum of Title IX and sexual misconduct on college campuses. So many topics.
Yasmine?
You know, in line with what has been already said, perhaps diversifying the curriculum by including more DEI items, including race, ethnicity, gender, you know, and perhaps through a lens of like community engagement. What are the realities on the ground that we can mitigate in the classroom? And then adding a public policy component to the curriculum as well, to kind of understand, well, this is what we have on the table. And again, part of those conversations, like the DI conversations and the realities of the community, how can we mitigate those? I remember we had an ethics class as an elective. I don't know if that class is still available, but that was my exposure to DEI without necessarily calling it DEI during my time at the MPA program. And probably like opening the program to a more international approach to studying public administration, where comparisons could be drawn from what is being done elsewhere in the world to kind of like answer the issues that we have locally, you know, through case studies, comparisons, just, you know, just a couple things to think about to be more inclusive. Because the field is like very male dominated in general, whether it be public administration or political science. And so perhaps like opening up to diversifying things could bring in different perspectives to the field.
Thank you very much, everybody, for your answers on that. So before we get to the last question, of course, if you have any questions, if you want to ask.
Yes, that is a question when you ask on public administration in academic work. Most time when we come to school or we enter school, try to build up a career, whatever degree you earn, and whatever workforce you find yourself in, sometimes you use about 5 to 10% of what you learn in class. As students like us in university, we are trying to work towards career. And so how can this seminar or maybe workshop fit into that part of us that maybe we'll be able to build our career and believe in university?
I've got an answer for that one. So one of the unique areas of the MPA program was we got to do research projects. And because I already was employed in a career, I was able to customize my research projects to areas that interested me and benefited me in my professional career. Like I could say, this is something that I want to research. And so it really was 100% applicable to me. Like the knowledge that I was gaining was actually real life, usable in the field. And that happened in 2 different courses, you know, like our culminating experience, of course, I got to pick something that I was interested in. But in our research class, I was able to pick something that I was able to apply the knowledge and tools I was actually learning in the class. And that was really important. Because you're right, you know, you spend all this time in class and like you're mining out, you know, 5 to 10% of it, but it was customizable because I was already a professional. I needed to be able to use what I was learning in my career.
Anybody else have anything they wanted to add on that? Oh, just I think the question was taking what you learn, taking the information that you're learning in class and actually using it to get to, whatever you want your career to be. So basically taking what we learn in the classroom and applying it in our profession. Is that fair? Okay. So Yasmine, if you wanted to add on anything to that.
Sure, just from my personal experience, as a person who did not really have more than internships on her resume when I joined the MPA program, I knew that I wanted to be in academia. So I took classes with people who were mostly professionals, right? Um, and it did not make the experience at the MPA program like less rewarding, because just like I was saying earlier, the way the courses are designed, are like simplified in ways that would enable any person to access the information. And it's information that could be valuable to people in the professional field and or people who would like to be in academia later on. So, when you get classes like statistics, when you get research design, when you get foundational theoretical courses, all those components combined, are helpful for both fields. It's at the end of the day, it's the way you approach your course content that makes the difference. So perhaps for people, and I don't want to speak for people who are like professionals, but the way you approach it is you always think about it empirically, right? So because you have a case, like you are part of the case study, so like you have exposure to certain elements, that when you hear something in class or when you wrestle with the content that is provided to you, you have a reference point, right? Like there's always something you're associating the theory to with practice. But when you don't have experience or when you want to go into academia with no prior experience, like professionally, then you think about things differently. Like you start thinking about theories and how can I develop this and what does it mean in real life? And you start asking a different type of questions that probably like open up they broaden your horizons and open up different perspectives on how you approach your class content. So it's really like a personal thing. It's how you want to see the class content that's being provided to you. And that's, that also speaks to what I was talking about earlier about the kind of support that you're getting from the department, right? So the way your professors support you is the way you want to be supported. So from the get-go, I expressed my interest in academia. Everything I was doing was shaped and catered around me to support me in that endeavor. So, and I'm pretty sure this is like the same applies to with other students in with other interests.
I think the one thing to add to that, I think everybody kind of hit on a little bit, was when you go into the program, you are interacting with people who are professionals. They're like me, I was a new professional. I only been in my role within higher education for, I think, 3 years at that time. You have people who have been in higher education for 10, 20 years. And then you have students who are fresh out the gate from their undergrad. And it's something where when you're in public administration and dealing in that world, that is the gamut. And so being in the program prepared you for your profession. You're dealing with people who are coming out of learning in a classroom textbook for 3 to 5 years, and that's the world they know is what they read in the book. They don't see those practical applications yet. Then you have people who are kind of green in their careers and are seeing the beginnings of how those policies shape and how research shapes their world. And then you have people who have been there longer and who are firmly in their careers, who are bringing that perspective. And that was something that it hit me when we were doing discussion boards, is because you'd have people who were talking about, oh yeah, I've been in this profession, I'm 25 years in, and then they're interacting with somebody who's 21 fresh out of their undergrad. And so getting to see how their mindsets and how their experiences are merging, even on a discussion board where you'll never get to meet these people in real life necessarily, And that's how, again, public administration is. You're gonna deal with people across the country, across the world, dealing with issues and working with them and with different perspectives. And so that's something that this program, whether intentionally designed or not, brings major added value that I don't think you necessarily will see in other programs that you can achieve.
Did you have any other questions?
Yeah, the second question. Now, right now, I'm a grad assistant in the Department of Earth and Environmental Systems. Found myself in the public administration say workshop seminar. So how best can I apply this training session into my GA position right now at ISU?
I mean, I'll go ahead and, since I'm not technically a panelist, obviously, but I'll take a stab at it. So, I mean, one thing I think as a graduate assistant and as a student, at Indiana State specifically, I think it is very useful to have an understanding of how the university works, especially if you're planning on going into higher education as a career. You had mentioned previously about, becoming a professor at some point. So, I mean, understanding, even if it's not going to directly be a part of your job, what residential life has to deal with, what risk management has to deal with what the, Title IX office has to deal with. I mean, that's still going to affect, because eventually it will impact your classroom in some way. There will be a student who's having a residence hall issue and it's affecting their academic performance, or maybe they're having some kind of issue with a significant other that's reached the Title IX office, or they're part of a student organization and the student organization maybe has gotten into some issues, or the students may even come to you as a professor and say, we want to do this activity, but we can't figure out how to do it in such a way where it's going to get approved. So, do you have any ideas? So I think from the perspective of just having that information, I think it's worthwhile, because as a faculty member, it's very easy to get siloed. And I do it all the time. And frankly, I wouldn't know half the stuff that I do know if I didn't have people in my classes that have to deal with it. And they either write about it in their work, or they come to class and they talk about it. So I think, from that perspective, it's important. From the other side, from Yasmine's perspective, I mean, everything that Yasmine said about being a PhD student, I would second everything that she said. And obviously there's a generational difference there. So I was doing my PhD work, I won't say how long ago I did it, but I mean, it was long enough ago that, I mean, there's a generation gap there, but I mean, the issues are still the same. So if you're thinking about I mean, you're pursuing a PhD at this point. So, everything that I think she said is applicable to anybody pursuing a PhD at some level, both the positive and the negative. So I would particularly pay attention to what she said from the perspective of pursuing that degree. So did anybody have anything they wanted to add?
Yasmine, if you didn't hear the question, it was basically, he was asking specifically about applying information from this workshop in particular to being a graduate. He's a graduate assistant, he's a PhD student at the moment, so applying it. So that's what I was responding to. So if you want to add anything onto that.
So the question was how to apply whatever, like the key takeaways from this discussion to their position as a graduate assistant. Am I hearing this right?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah. Well, being a grad assistant in the first place is a position, like it's a professional experience that should be cherished and appreciated within itself. It's not just part of like managing to get your degree funded. somehow, but it's also like a professional experience in which you get to interact with a different group of people, in which you have to fulfill your duties, and in which you technically have to apply some of the concepts that you learned from the MPA program. Um, so perhaps a little bit less when you're a teaching assistant, in that like you have teaching duties, you have to prepare course content, you have to grade papers, but more like when you have a research position or an administrative position of some kind. Um, my personal experience as like a research assistant working at a cultural center or working at a higher ed managerial position with the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. Those two experiences are the ones that introduced me to things like DEI, which I didn't really know much about and until I joined those jobs, you know. Um, and so everything's like when you're in a higher ed institution in general, things speak to each other, right? So whatever you're doing as a GA speaks to your actual work, like your actual coursework, to your research interests, and you just like blend everything in to become the scholar or the PhD holder that you are or that you will be.
All right, thank you very much. We are getting somewhat close to time, so I want to make sure to leave some time for everybody to address the final question. Did you have any final questions or any additional questions? So the final question is there anything that you would like to add that someone aspiring to your profession should know? So if anybody is looking to go into a career in, student life, residential life, or, risk management, all the careers that are represented here, career paths that are represented here, what, sort of piece of advice would you offer to those people? Let's start with David.
I think it's don't shoehorn yourself to one ideal of what you can do as a professional. Right out of college, I worked retail for 12 years. Within college and then after until I worked here is 12 years of retail. And I initially thought, nope, this is what I'm going to do. And it's never too late to make a change, and it's never too late that you can't find what your ideal profession is. You can always find that in higher education. With me, with most of my work that I do analytics in the business side of things. So we do budget, we do system builds out, we work with IT. There's not as much day-to-day physical interaction with students. But if you want to deal with students on a conduct level or that piece of it, there's something for you in higher education. But you don't have to go the route of a higher ed degree. And it's never too late to jump into the MPA program. So that's something where I finished my undergrad in 2009, and I started my graduate program in 2019. So that's 10 years post-bachelor's degree that I decided, nope, this is what I want to do, and this is the path that will get me to excel in my profession. So it's just never think that what you want to do can't be found in higher ed. There's legal, there's straight administration. You could be the president of an institution, a VP. There's always a spot within higher ed, whichever kind of way you want to go.
I would say never doubt yourself. I was recruited for this position and I didn't think I was qualified, but with my background, I've kind of been a trailblazer and was able to bring a lot to the table that stuff hasn't been done before, and able to change things and put education out in ISU today to educate employees so they know what they're required to do, what's expected. It's not a boring job. I do so many different things, work with so many different groups, and it's just, there's not a day that's the same. And so it's constantly learning, pushing yourself to grow, always thinking of different ways to make things better. And I mean, I still work with legal, and I didn't have to completely give up what I've always done. So risk is, it's just very broad. And so I would just say, if that's something that you're interested in and being proactive and organized and like everyone says, like just tracking the data, if that's something that you're interested in, I would definitely pursue it.
I think my big takeaway is skills are skills. And if you have the skills, your position will come. I was 48 years old when I started the MPA program. I too did not have a background in higher education. I'd been in municipal law for 22 years before I came to ISU. I didn't have a lot of self-confidence about going into this position, but I had a skill set and a foundation that was transferable. And so even if I were to leave higher ed now, I think there are lots of life lessons and skills that I have gathered that will transfer to other positions. Just in, for example, supervision of others. I think I've really had an opportunity to make some mistakes and learn some lessons. And that's going to be transferable to any position. And so it's never too late to start, and skills will be transferable.
Okay, Yasmine?
A piece of advice is to like there is no linearity in a career path, and there should be none. I started as a business major and switched to public administration before I ended up in a political science program. You know, they're like every experience should be perceived as a growth opportunity, more than anything else, and trying to find purpose in everything you're doing. If I signed up for a degree, what's in it for me? How am I growing? And then think of how can this get me to where I want to be? And of course, when like always ask the right questions before getting involved with something, right? Before joining the MPA program, I remember sitting with Nathan and having a conversation, asking a million questions about what is this about? What am I supposed to expect? What are the kind of challenges students are facing? You know, and I did the same thing when I was trying to join the PhD program. So it's, you know, just always be prepared, ask the right questions, and see every single thing happening in your career as an opportunity, as a challenge, not as an obstacle that will block you and impede you and not let you grow. And skills are something that you develop. Some of them are acquired, but others are things that you build over time, through learning and exposure to different people and places and experiences.
Thank you very much. I do want to, there was actually somebody else who was supposed to be on the panel, Ashley Hemrich, who was an MPA student, and currently works in the social services realm. She had a employee take sick, so she had to kind of fill in for them. But she said, you know, one piece of advice she gave was please encourage them to think outside the box regarding careers in higher education, you know, looking beyond just teaching as a career, which I think obviously we have, you know, I think established that pretty well. And talking about, you know, she's had great experiences working with people who dealt with like freedom of information and HIPAA, you know, health privacy issues, campus police, you know, and people working in healthcare. So I think she just wanted to emphasize, you know, looking at the full range of opportunities that are available. So I wanted to make sure that her voice, you know, was able to get in there as well, since she couldn't join us today, unfortunately. Any final thoughts? Anything we didn't cover? Anything I didn't ask that I should have asked?
It's okay.
So, well, I appreciate everybody coming today. I think it was a really good conversation. I think it did give a pretty good representation of the diversity of opportunities and challenges in higher education. Hopefully, if you're listening or watching this, you got something out of it. If you have any questions about what we talked about or anything, you can reach out to me. My name again is Nathan Myers. I'm at Indiana State University in the Department of Political Science. I'm the MPA director. So feel free to reach out. Good luck to everyone on the panel with what I imagine will be a busy year. Good luck to Yasmine with her studies, and thanks very much.